booties for black girl nerds.
Hi, Prentice. How are
Hi,
you?
good. How you doing, Jamie?
I'm doing good. Listen, I got a bone to pick with you, Prentice.
Uh-oh. What's the bone?
I enjoyed this documentary. I love the fact that you have all factions of Black Twitter. You
Okay.
got Black academic Twitter, you
Uh-huh.
got social justice Twitter,
Uh-huh.
you got Kiki Twitter.
Okay.
Where where's blurred Twitter? Where's Black nerd Twitter?
I mean, I feel like it's always existing in all of that. It's all. I feel like Kamal's a little bit of a nerd. Kamal's a little bit of a nerd.
True, we've talked to him. Yes,
Barrington is a
indeed.
little bit of a nerd. Barrington is a little bit of a nerd.
Yeah,
Next
yeah.
one. Next one. Next one, we'll have it.
I'm just saying, I would love to have the conversation because Black girl nerds, we've shifted the culture
For
too in
sure.
the Twitter space.
1,000%.
Yes.
1,000%.
Well, cool. I love the conversations that we see evolve in this docu-series. And this was a very ambitious project to
Mhm.
take on. And Black Twitter is so dense.
Super
So two-part
dense.
question. It really is.
Yeah, it is.
What led you to decide to pick the spokespeople in this documentary, for the commentators for this doc?
Mhm.
And then why did you decide to start from early Black Twitter as opposed to the current Black Twitter that we're in?
Yeah, I mean, the initial list of people, obviously, like the doc is based on an article, right? So a lot of our early work was done by proxy of who's in the article, right? Of who Jason decided to interview. And I think he got 25 interviews or something like that. So a lot of our early work was like, well, who did and Jason did so much pre-work, right? So a lot of it in the beginning was, well, who did you feel contributed the most to what you were trying to say and blah, blah, blah. And there were a lot of people and I came on the article, I came onto the project in 2021. So even back then, Jason had tried to interview certain people. Certain people were busy. Certain people were like, oh, I'm available. Certain people maybe were like, I don't want to talk about that or whatever. So a lot of that was kind of, I don't want to say done before us, but kind of at least pre-foundational there for that. And so off of that, Jason was like, hey, he and I would sit with over Zoom and talk about the stuff. And he would say, here's like actually 10 more people that I wish I could have talked to that weren't available then that like maybe you can talk to. Or this person I wanted to dive into more in the piece that I just couldn't dive into. So a lot of it was like, that was kind of the process of it, right? And then it was, well, what's the story, right? So in terms of that, like Jason's article kind of has 3 parts to the article. So for me, I was like, well, I don't want the story just to be anything you can just Google. Because if you can just Google it, then that's not a story. That's just information, right? So as I read the article, as a narrative creator, I'm always thinking, again, about story. And Jason's article had 3 parts. So to me, I started thinking, oh, there's a 3-act structure to this story. So I'm okay, great. There's a 3-act structure, but still, what is the story? There's lots of kinds of stories. So as I read it, it read very fun in the beginning. And then Trayvon's kind of a turn in the article. And then Black Twitter's facing more serious things. So for me, that became a coming of age story. So it was like, okay, we talked about Star Wars and Harry Potter kind of being comps of like, Star Wars starts where it's like, here's Luke and he doesn't know anything and he's just kind of innocent. He meets Obi-Wan and then Obi-Wan dies. And then that's the first kind of dark thing to this character, right? Now our character recognizes they're on kind of a different, more mature journey, right? As he goes into Empire, right? So for us, that was a similar thing. Black Twitter's fun. What is this space? It's fun. We're all hanging out. We're kikiing. And then Trayvon happens. Now it's taking if the platform if Black Twitter is the hero, it's taking our character into a different bit of a story. What are we going to do now, right? Are we going to rise to the challenge? What are the struggles? And that to me became great. That's the story. So now, as you're sitting with that, now you're like, well, what are the incidents that tell that story? Right? Because to your point, there's so much, right? So for us, it was finding the incidents that tell that story. There were things that we were like, oh, this is going to be a part, and then realize it's really not, right? And things like that. And then as you're doing that and you're lining up, what are the events that tell that story? And even that changes, as you know, when you're filming, when you're editing. But then it becomes, well, who can fill those spaces, right? So like in the article, there's parts about Obama, but now you got to figure out who can really speak to that, right? So you got to get a Brad Jenkins to participate in this, right? So then you're kind of filling people that can speak to the story you want to tell. So I agree with you. It needs to be 8, 9, 10 documentaries about Black Twitter because it is so dense. You could focus on just the early days. You could focus on this part. You could focus on that part. But in terms of like today versus then, it really was using the article to kind of talk about giving it a structure. And again, because it's so dense, there were so many things we couldn't include. Or just were like, yes, we want to talk about this is important, but it's not necessarily telling the story, right? That we're telling, right? So that kind of just becomes like anything. You just can't obviously fit all of it. It's like trying to tell the history of the world in like 3 parts. It's like, I don't know how you do that. It's almost impossible. You got to kind of like pick a moment and pick a bigger theme you're trying to say than what the article is doing. Because even the article he had written an article in 2021. Well, Elon had not bought the platform yet. Right. So there's still more to that story. So in the doc, we're filming the doc and he buys the platform. Now we have to work that part into the doc. We got to talk about that, right? Because that's going to obviously have huge implications on the subject matter, right? We always talked about that happening. It's kind of like the Emperor showing up in Return of the Jedi. It's like, here's the final boss, right? So that's kind of how. So just to like let you in, kind of like behind the curtain. That was kind of behind the curtain, right? So obviously, you can't, and even for this doc, I mean, you're still talking to like, 40, 50 people, which for a doc is a lot of people, you know what I mean? So, but obviously you can't get everybody in there and you're doing the best you can to like, again, tell a bigger story, but there could be a bunch of articles written again on a bunch of different timelines. I mean, there's a whole metaverse to Black Twitter really, in terms of, you're just going to focus on, pre-pandemic versus post-pandemic Black Twitter. So it's tricky to pick out the moments you're just like, what is the best narrative for what we're trying to say in that way. And that was sort of like the narrative that we picked.
Yeah, I appreciate you explaining that because you could do multiple
100%.
Seasons of this series.
And there should be. I mean, there should be multiple. It's not like I'm not the authority on that or Jason or any of us. We're just like, this is the narrative we were telling, and there should be more narratives about that.
Absolutely. So in typical Black Twitter fashion, you got a bit of pushback from Black Twitter when the trailer was released. Mm-hmm. And you were right there on the front lines.
I ain't running.
Speaking out. You're like, I ain't scared. Like,
I ain't
scared. Tweeting, about the people's reactions to it. Now that you're on this press tour, about the series, what do you have to say about what critics are saying so far about the reaction to the trailer?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think the conversations we're having now with critics are about they've seen the piece, right? So now we're having a secondary conversation where that's not about the trailer anymore. And to your point, right? It's so dense. How can you fit what this doc is into 90 seconds? How do you do that, right? It's to me, it's like impossible, right? There's so much we're talking about. Do you talk about just the serious stuff? You talk about the funny stuff. You're trying to find a balance of what's entertaining, but also, hey, we're going to get into this or get into that. But my thing, I love the way I want a response to it. That's the whole point, right? So to me, I don't ever shy away from the conversation. That's why when people it's one thing if you go, this looks like trash. Okay, cool. That's fine. I mean, you could say that. When the stuff I tried to engage on was when it was like, who is this for? Why are we saying these things? Now we can have a different conversation to me, right? And the reason why we can have a different conversation is because first I had to ask myself why. Where is this coming from? Where is the energy that's coming from? And once I understood, I was like, the energy just comes from that Black people typically, when it comes to our lives and our culture and our stories in Hollywood, we're not necessarily always the arbiter of the story. 2, it gets turned and manipulated or appropriated in a way that doesn't feel like it represents us. And Black Twitter is a special place where we feel heard or seen. So I get the skepticism of like, what is this for? Who's doing this? Oh, it's Hulu, not recognizing, it's all these sort of Black creators and it's at Onyx Studios, which is a Black-run studio. Like, it's not considering all those factors, which I totally understand. Why would someone who lives in Cincinnati be thinking about all those factors? So I understand the hesitancy to want to buy in 1,000%. But what I also wanted to engage in is that we're living in a time right now, and I don't think people necessarily realize this, is that I took my daughter to New York and we went to Ellis Island, and she walked over to the book where the signatures are. And I just told her, baby, we're not in that book. We didn't sign our names on a book. We're not of Irish or Italian. We didn't come over on these things, and we're not in those books. Because so much about Black life and Black culture in this country is oral, right? Our history, our traditions, our things like that. And so to me, because we don't own the platform, if he wanted to, he could turn the platform off tomorrow, and everything that happened on Black Twitter would just be another oral tradition. And the fact that there would be an oral tradition about Black Twitter in 2024 when things are documented is wild to me. So to me, it's not about even who is this for. It's for us. It's for the culture. It's for America. It's for at a time when they're pulling books out of libraries and the time when they're trying to tell us slavery had good sides to it. Well, what's pushing back against those narratives, right? What's saying, hey, here's something contrary to that. That's not the truth of that, right? And, you know, the one thing that I've learned is like, you know, you don't want truth to be lost to lies, right? And it would be if we weren't documenting these stories in these moments. So for me, it's like my kids didn't come up on Twitter, right? They came up on TikTok and Snapchat and all that. So like they don't really know what Twitter is like that, right? But they reap the benefits of the empowerment of a Black Lives Matter hashtag. They reap like my daughter reaps the benefits of a hashtag like Black Girl Magic. So when I say who is it for, it's like it's for my kids. It's for the culture to represent and to appreciate all that we've done, but it's for my kids, it's for my kids' kids, it's for all of that, right? Because that's who it's for. So, but I understand us wanting to protect that, but we're living in a time where we also can't protect everything so much that we're not telling our truths. And I don't know how we win when well, we need us to tell our stories. Why are we telling our stories? You know, how do you win in that, right? What do we want to do, right? And so I feel as long as we're telling our stories with love and care and reverence and respect, that's the most important thing. We're not monoliths. We're not going to be always happy or appreciate or understand why we do the things we do. But I try to think that if we move with respect and honor and love in that there's, again, the better side of that. But to think that we're living in the same times we lived in before any of this is like forgetting the plot. Like the plot's unfolding. It's clear what certain people's agendas are in this country. And unless we have anything that pushes back against that, that's to me more concerning.
My last question to you, Prentice, there's so much more story to tell about Black Twitter. Mm-hmm. Do you have any plans to create future seasons for this series? I mean, we've talked about that. There's so much more to Black Twitter than what we saw through Jason's story. Sure. Is there plans in the future for more of this?
No, I guess we'll see what happens on May 9th. We'll see we'll see how people respond. I mean, as of right now, no, but I think there's so many more stories to tell that I would welcome that for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to Black Girl Nerds. I can't wait to see the next episode. I screened the first two during South by Southwest, and I look forward to seeing how this series wraps up. So I appreciate your time.
Please, thank you so much.
All right, take care.
Take care, bye-bye.
Better shake your booties for Black Girl Nerds. Better shake your booties for Black Girl Nerds.